Welcome back. If you're new to my channel, I'm Ross the Oliver Man, and in the last video we started working on getting some of the plows back in order, and we got the hubs off of the shaft for the coulters, and we need to replace bearings in there. And then on the 5-bottom 565 plow, we need to put bearings in the tail wheel. And so I thought it'd be a good time to just talk about different types of bearings and what they do and why we use what we use. And basically what we have in wheels or these coulter hubs are tapered roller bearings. Here you can see, hopefully. Anyway, they're cone shaped or tapered, and they fit inside of this, what I call the race. Some people call it a cup, but anyway, it's also tapered the same way, and you put them together and you've got a bearing. And you might wonder why use such a design like this instead of just a regular roller bearing. We use those in things like in this sprocket idler. You just have a ball bearing in there with a hole in it, and there you go. But the reason that you don't use that type of thing in like a wheel is because, for one, these bearings are not really designed for side load, where what I'm talking about is when it's mounted up, it's meant to be in one spot and that's that. It doesn't have a lot of pull from side to side, otherwise this bearing won't take that. That's just too much on this style bearing. So that's one advantage of using this in like a wheel application, because you get a lot of side pressure from different things. The other, or I guess another, maybe not the only one, but another advantage is when you have a bearing like this, it is either a bearing or it's not. And what I mean is, once it's wore out to a certain point, that's it. It's over with, and you're going to be replacing. These style bearings actually give you a little bit of adjustment, where as things wear, you can tighten down on the nut on the end of the shaft, and it's going to force this into the race deeper and tighten everything up. Because if you look at this, and we'll just use this one, in a wheel, you have one on each side, and then as you tighten the nut on the thing, you're really squeezing these together, and that makes everything tight, so you don't have any side-to-side play. And so that's an advantage of this. As it wears, you can just tighten it up a little bit and keep that in there, and it should last a long time for you, as long as you keep up on greasing it and making sure that you don't run it too loose. Another advantage of this over a sealed roller bearing like this, and I don't claim to be a scientist, but I'll tell you what I'm thinking here, is you're getting more surface area with this to spread the load out on versus something like this. This is mainly, if you were using it in a thing like application like this, you're going to be putting force down on it, and it's going to just be the width of this bearing, whereas on this taper, you're gaining a little bit of surface area because it spreads it out over a longer area. So I think that's another advantage of this over that, and they've caught on to that early on in, I guess, automotive industry or different things, because anything that uses a lot of high speed that has the potential for any kind of side load uses bearings like this. You still see these type of bearings all over on shafts and things where they just have to kind of hang out and nothing's moving, you know, this way. It's just bolted in one position. But for anything where you have side load, this is definitely one of the ways to go. Now, comparing this to this type of bearing, it doesn't really look like this, and it doesn't really look like this. But this is a specific type of bearing that is actually meant for downforce load, because this goes in the bottom of a spindle, actually on a Super 55. But I don't know if you can see it in there, but it's just really heavy duty. It's thick, and it's got bigger little roller barrels in there, and you put that at the bottom, and then as your weight of your axle is pushing down on it, it still gives you a surface that will spin easy. So not all bearings are created equal is what I guess I'm saying. Things have their specific purpose, and so if you don't have anything left, do a little bit of homework to make sure you're replacing it with the right thing, because if you put in something that's not designed for the application, it's probably not going to last very long. Now, most of our, well, like our plow hub and the coulters take this style bearing, just like this. You drive this into the hub, and then here's your bearing. But one side of the coulter actually takes this. And this is identical to that, except for it's got a rubber shield made into one side of it, so that when you drive it in the back side of the hub, now you have your seal built in. This is good for occasions when you don't have the extra room to put a seal in. This gains you some space, because if you put an oil seal after the bearing, and I should have one handy close by here, I hope, and I'll show you. But if you imagine this in the hub, and if it was just the plain bearing, and put that back in, and then you put this, you're going to have a lot more, need a lot more space in your hub to get all this in there. And so by doing this other way, you've got your seal already made in, and there you go. And this is important on the coulters because they're going to be riding in dust and dirt quite often. So that's what we'll do. We're going to work on putting some of this stuff in. So we have two things we need to do real quick before we get started on putting in new stuff. Number one is we need to get what's left of the old bearing off of this shaft and get it cleaned up. So we'll try to probably end up heating this up just to get it broke loose easy. And I happen to have a brand new snap-on bearing puller. If you watched the last one, the other one had started to crack in here. So this one's good. This one's the 40 Oz hammer. We had a 32 Oz hammer, so we'll see how much the 8 extra Oz's gains us. But anyway, it's been my experience that 40 ounces is always a lot of fun. So we'll see what happens. But we'll get this off of there. And then our next thing will be to get in here, and they are rusty and crusty, but get the old bearing races drove out of here so that we can put the new ones in. And it is very, very nasty. So it's going to probably fight us, but we'll give it a try anyway. Well, there we have one dismounted old bearing, and we'll have to clean up on that quite a bit before we put the new ones on. And then we should be in business. We need to just now work on these. Probably also work on the other one and get that off of there while we're at it. So, I don't know, maybe I'll do that first and then we'll get the bearings out of there. I think a guy will even do the proper thing and give it a few scrapes with the old wire brush before we get started. It's got a lot of dirt caked on there. So I don't know if you can see or not, but these are pretty nasty with old dirt and grease caked in there. So it's going to be kind of a trick to get in there and get these out. I suppose a guy can heat them up the same way we did. Just heat the bearing material and then let it cool and loosen it up. That might be what we have to do. I don't know. I'll get a few love taps with the old snap-on bearing puller and see what happens. Hey, all right, we're coming. There we go. I'd say it was the 8 extra Aussies that did it. That handle or hammer is just a little bit heavier and handle slightly longer, which is great because then when you're using this as a pry bar, you can really get with it. That's one thing about this, I will say, and I'm not, you know, being paid to say this, but if you want a good hammer, get one of these snap-on hammers. It's expensive, but boy, it's very useful. You can use it as everything. Hub remover, bearing puller, I mean, pry bar, you can use it as a wheel chock, you can use it just about anything. It doesn't work as good as a hitch pin, it's a little too big around, I've tried that, but basically anything else. Glass cutter works good at that, you know. If you got something you need taken out, this is the way to go. So get you one of these if you want a good hammer. Now let's work on the other side. Works as a vise tightener. Just good for everything. So you can see we got those out of here now. Probably should clean up a little bit in the center groove because that's where your grease comes in at. So we need to get that cleaned up before we put it back together. See if we can have a repeat success with this one. 1. There. This one's a little bit better in there, but still got a lot of crap in that grease groove, so we're gonna have to take a minute here and try to get that cleaned up. Well, there's the grease hole, so it is open, but we'll give it a little cleanup job and make sure that grease fitting is free, and then we'll start putting bearings back in. And I don't know why I'm surprised, but that grease hole is plugged up pretty solid. So I guess we'll go ahead and pull this grease zerk out of here and try to open the hole up, and then might be able to reuse this one, might have to put a new one in, but either way, the time is now, so we'll get that done. And amazingly enough, this one turns without much effort. I fully expected to have a fight on our hand with that too. So we'll get something in there, and yeah, see that old dry grease in there mixed with a little dirt? We'll get that punched out here. Pretty solid. Even pushing by hand is a little much. We don't want to ruin our threads in our grease hole, but I think I might actually try to heat that just to blow some of that trash out of there. Well, now that it's 82 million degrees, we'll just stick our fingers right back in there and tighten this up. Anything to make things easier. I guess I should have checked to see if this grease fitting was going to take grease, but might as well put it in and then take it right back out again. That's pretty well the way that goes. Let's see what happens wherever I put my grease gun. I think we're going to put a new one in. I think that one is past its useful life. It's no fun if you don't get to do things twice, so this is just extra fun. Need to get some more of these straight ones here. They are 1/8 inch pipe thread. That's probably the most common size you'll find. Although now today there's a lot of metric goofy stuff, but pretty well anything from the heyday of agriculture used the 1/8 inch pipe thread straight grease fitting. Now we should be in a place where technically we could grease it if we just do it. A lot of farms don't own a grease gun, seems like, but I do, and I try to keep stuff greased. So now we're ready to put races back in this, and this is unusual compared to a lot of your automotive style wheel bearings or the hub on the tail wheel of the plow, where both of these are the same size bearing, and a lot of times on your cars and whatever, the back one's bigger and the small ones, or the front one's smaller. And anyway, these are both the same size bearing, which makes it easy if you want to keep extra parts on hand. The only difference being the back one has that rubber shield made into it. So we'll drive some races in here and then see about mounting it up on the shaft there. So they make a fancy seal and bearing driver, but I never grew up with one of those, so I'll show you the old-timey way of doing it, and that is you just take this and the old one, work your way around it, keep it going in even, and then also not to get your old one stuck down in there. This one has kind of a relief in it where it's not the same diameter all the way back to where the bearing race sits. So I think we're there. You can see we're flush. I don't know if you can see that or not, but anyway, we're up against there. You can feel it in the hammer and hear it because it gets more solid. So we'll put the front one in now. Now this one we got to be careful because we can get the old race stuck because it's the same size bore all the way out, it seems like. So see, we're starting to get it in there tight. So what we'll do is get that old one back out of there, finish driving it in with a punch. Now this you need to be careful with because if you get your punch to slip off of there too much, you're going to end up ruining your brand new race. So you got to be kind of careful. I use, for whatever reason, you kind of get a favorite punch. I don't know why, but out of a whole drawer full of tools, seems like you end up using the same one for everything. So I think we're about there. Well, maybe not. I'm gonna actually switch gears here just to be sure I don't skid off of there. And I know you probably can't see it, but you kind of go all the way around so you get it down evenly. Are we about there? Almost. Yeah, I think we're there. Yep. Okay. So we've got our two new races drove in here. Now, a very important step, and that is packing the bearings. People don't seem to really always understand what the deal is with that, so I'll just show you what we're talking about. So you got your brand new bearing, and it's dry. If you just put it in like this, you're not going to go very far before you got a problem. So people think, okay, grease the bearings. They take some grease, smear it on the outside, put it in, good enough, right? No. You need to get grease down in there underneath of these little barrels so that you have grease all the way around. And of course, the old way again, you just put grease on there and kind of smack it and roll it around until you get grease coming out everywhere. But they make a handy tool that's not that expensive, and I'll show you that now. And here we have a bearing packer. And basically, you fill it full of your favorite house brand of grease, and then you push down, you put the bearing in there, and you've got this tapered cone, so it fits different size bearings. You push down, grease is forced up through the bearing, and then you've got a bearing that's ready to go. So we will do this. We'll put this in there like that, and then put this in, and I'll probably have to set this down in order to get it. But anyway, just a second and I'll show you again. Okay, so you can see how that worked. It forced grease in between the two parts of the bearing, so that it's definitely under those rollers now. And you can tell by holding it, when you turn it, it's stiff because it's full of grease. So that's what we want. And then I usually put a little more on the outside, just because, hey, grease is cheap, right? Might as well make a mess. So we'll do that to the other bearing, and then we'll try to assemble this on the shaft. This bearing is that one with the rubber shield, so it's going to be different. You're not going to be able to see the grease coming out the backside, so when she's full, she's full. It'll probably come out between the seal and there, so anyway, we'll put it in there. And there we have another nicely packed bearing full of grease. So this one, once it's in there, you can see it will make a nice seal because it's got that piece of rubber on it. This one will go in this way, and we'll tighten her down on there, and we'll have something. So we'll get the shaft cleaned up real quick, and then we'll put this on and adjust on it. I should also point out that this is the box full of bearings I got to fix the coulters on the plow and the wheel bearings for that other plow. $184 for this box of bearings. So they are definitely proud of them. But if you want to know for the coulters what style bearings or numbers you need a PBR 6, which is a race and bearing for the outside of the coulter. And then for the inside, it's the same bearing except it has that rubber shield on it. So this is the number for the cone, which is just the bearing itself that has the rubber shield on one side. And then you need a race. You can either get one of those other bearings and just use the race and not the bearing, or here is the number of just the race. I don't know if you can see that. It's a 27501-065, and that's just the race that would go with this rubber shielded bearing. Or you can buy one of these and scrap the bearing and just take the race. I think these were like $8 for the pair. And then when you get into this stuff, $22 for this. So that's great. And anyway, hopefully it keeps the dirt out. This was like $4 for the race. So basically half of what the set was together. So anyway, you can do what you want, but I thought maybe you'd like to know the numbers in case you have to do this project too. So you can see, after cleaning this up, which I didn't record because guy polishes shaft probably would not be a YouTube video that anybody'd want to watch. But it's been wore pretty bad in the middle. So I first thought maybe it had a relief cut in it, but I think it just got loose one time with a wore out bearing and cut a groove in there. But I might be wrong. But it doesn't matter. We're gonna put this together now and we should be in good shape. And what you're gonna wanna do is drop your new bearing. That's always what you wanna do. Drop it in the mud so you get to clean it up first. So we want the best chance of having to do this a second time, see? So, I was hoping that that one would slide on there very easily. There we go. Now on a wheel, like on your car or whatever, you usually have some type of heavy washer, just like this one does. And then you have a castle nut with a cotter pin through it. But on the plow, we just have this nylon lock nut. So we're going to tighten it down on there. And then we're not going to tighten it down on there. We're going to drop it on the ground. I don't like to put these on with an impact. I want to be able to feel what's going on. I know some people get crazy with the impact, and it would be fine to a point, but you want to be able to tell what you're doing, not just blindly going at it here. And then keep checking to see where you're at, because as you tighten this down, it's going to squeeze those two cones together and make this tighter. And really, you want to go a little tighter than what you want first to get everything seated, and then back it off. Or at least that's what I like to do. See, that's getting there where it can also fool you if you aren't paying attention, especially on a cold day, because the grease will make it stiff. So you want to be sure that you get it where you want it. So that's a little too tight probably. Back it off just a little bit, or not. There we go. You want just a little bit of preload, or so it feels like it's not just you grab it and it just goes freewheeling. No, you want it to take a little bit of effort to get it started moving, but it should turn freely without grinding or binding up, and I think that's probably going to do it. So we'll leave it there. This probably isn't as critical as your ground wheel, because you know, if something happens to this, the worst you've got is losing time fixing it. It's not like you're going to crash into a tree and die. So we'll put some grease in this. I guess I should get my battery powered grease gun, but we'll just go manual today. That's fine. There we go. Now we got grease coming out. So for now, we'll probably leave that just to keep it clean in there. When we put it finally together with the blade, we'll grease it more, because your cap on the outside of your blade also is like, it takes the place of your dust cap like you'd have on an automobile type wheel. So anyway, hopefully that gained you some insight on bearings. I don't know, maybe you didn't need to know that, maybe you did, but I think we'll call this a wrap on this video. So thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.